The cultural landscape of the northwestern Great Plains is defined by a deep symbiotic relationship between a land known as Kitawasanun and the people who have inhabited it since time immemorial, the Niitsitapi. Known collectively as the Blackfoot Confederacy, these real people comprise four distinct nations: the Siksika, the Kenai, the Apatosipiakani, and the Amskapi-Piekuni, whose history predates the contemporary geopolitical constructs of Canada and the United States. Their story is not merely one of survival, but of a sophisticated social organization, a profound spiritual cosmology, and a resilient adaptation to environmental and colonial shifts. This report serves as a foundational ethno-historical document, providing the exhaustive detail and nuanced insight required to comprehend the Blackfoot legacy as a fluid, living narrative of sovereignty and identity. The Niitsitapi are an Algonquian-speaking people whose traditional territory once spanned from the North Saskatchewan River in present-day Alberta to the Yellowstone River in Montana, and from the Rocky Mountains to the Cypress Hills. This vast region was protected by 36 clans from the three original tribes, who maintained territorial boundaries through both diplomatic alliances and military prowess. The Confederacy was historically non-hierarchical, with decision-making rooted in consensus among leaders chosen for their unique skills and their proven ability to care for the vulnerable, particularly the youth and the elderly. The insertion of the 49th parallel following the War of 1812 and the subsequent border treaties between Britain and the United States fundamentally altered the Niitsitapi geopolitical reality. This international boundary bisected the traditional lands of the Piekani tribe, effectively bifurcating them into the Amskapi-Piekuni, Southern Pagan in Montana, and the Apatosipiakani, Northern Piekani in Alberta. This division created a unique class of transnational actors who were forced to navigate overlapping legal regimes and jurisdictional complexities while attempting to maintain kinship ties across a border that was, to them, largely incomprehensible. The Confederacy also formed crucial alliances with other nations, most notably the Tsuut'ina, Sarsi, an Athabascan-speaking group that became integrated into the Confederacy, and for a time the Aaninin Gros Ventre. These alliances were predicated on mutual defense and shared hunting grounds, creating a formidable military and economic bloc that controlled the fur trade routes and protected the dwindling bison herds during the 19th century. The Niitsitapi universe is governed by the presence of spirits in the lessons of Napi, or Old Man, the creator-trickster who shaped the world and its inhabitants. Napi is not a distant deity, but an active, often flawed participant in the creation of the physical landscape. According to oral tradition, Napi traveled from the south, molding the mountains, prairies, and forests, and placing red paint in the ground to demarcate the earth as it is seen today. The specific features of the northwestern plains are often explained through Napi's impulsive actions. For instance, the Knees, two large buttes, mark the spot where Napi stumbled over a knoll and fell, cursing the land for making him trip. On a hill near the Milk River, Napi rested with his arms extended. The stones he used to mark his figure are still visible, providing a tangible link between the spiritual progenitor and the physical territory. These stories serve as more than entertainment. They are a sophisticated pedagogical tool, teaching balance and the consequences of excess. A central narrative in Blackfoot cosmology involves Napi's encounter with the Red Rock. After a long journey, Napi sought moccasins from colored smoke, yellow, blue, and red, appearing from a spring. When the moccasins were too small, he kicked the rocks in a rage, resulting in the pockmarked surfaces seen on certain stones today. The Red Rock, angered by Napi's kick, chased him until Napi offered his buffalo robe as a gift. When Napi later retrieved the robe during a storm, the rock resumed its pursuit, eventually growing larger and heavier, symbolizing the enduring power of natural laws and the necessity of respecting spiritual compacts. Napi also established the social and biological order of the world. In a legendary debate with an old woman, the two decided the fate of human life. Napi argued that people should die for only 4 days before returning to life, but Old Woman insisted on permanent death to ensure that they would feel sorry for each other and that there would be sympathy in the world. This decision, finalized by a rock sinking in the water, established the emotional and social foundation of Niitsitapi life, where grief and communal support are central to the human experience. The bison, or Iani, is regarded as the creator's greatest gift to the Niitsitapi, and the life cycle of the animal dictated the seasonal round of the people for millennia. Before the introduction of the horse, the Niitsitapi were pedestrian hunters who utilized deep knowledge of animal behavior and topography to conduct communal hunts. The bison jump, most famously exemplified by the World Heritage Site Head Smashed In, involved driving herds over cliffs to secure the vast quantities of meat and hides necessary for survival. The seasonal movements of the Niitsitapi were a highly organized response to the environment. In the winter, bands moved into sheltered river valleys with abundant firewood and fresh water, where bison also sought refuge from the wind. As spring arrived and the buffalo plant flowered, the bands dispersed to follow the herds onto the grassy plains. This was a time of fresh food, duck eggs, wild turnips, and roasted camas bulbs, providing a welcome relief from the dried stores of winter. The summer gathering was the apex of the social calendar, as the various bands converged for the Sundance Okan ceremony. This event reinforced the bonds between the nations and provided an opportunity for the communal hunting of bison bulls, whose tongues were a ceremonial delicacy. Fall was dedicated to the intensive labor of processing meat and berries into pemmican, a nutrient-dense food that could last through the winter months. Women played the central role in this economy, managing the processing of resources and the movement of the camp. The reintroduction of the horse to the northern plains in the early 18th century, circa 1720s, served as a catalyst for a profound socio-economic shift. Prior to the elk dog, horse, the Niitsitapi relied on dogs to pull travoises. While a dog could pull roughly 35 kilograms, a horse could transport much heavier loads over greater distances, allowing for larger tipis, more substantial stores of food, and expanded territorial range. The horse transformed the Niitsitapi into nomadic pastoralists, necessitating a shift in land management to ensure adequate grazing for the herds. This technological advancement also altered the social structure from a relatively classless society to one where wealth was measured in horse ownership. A family without horses was at a distinct disadvantage, as they could not participate as effectively in the mounted bison chase or the high-prestige activities of raiding and war. Warfare itself was transformed by the horse. Raiding neighboring tribes for horses became a primary means for young men to earn social status and prove their bravery. This created a prestige economy where warriors gained honor by counting coup, touching an enemy with a decorated spear or lances called a coup stick, and escaping unharmed. Despite the shift toward a more hierarchical society, the Niitsitapi maintained a fiction of equal opportunity through communal hunts and the cultural mandate of generosity, where leaders were expected to provide for those with fewer resources. Niitsitapi society is characterized by a complementarity between men and women that granted women significant authority, particularly within the domestic and religious spheres. Women were the owners of the home, teepee, and all its furnishings. A husband lived in the wife's lodge at her discretion, and maternal lineage was the primary social anchor until the imposition of Western patriarchal systems in the late 19th century. The role of women was not limited to the domestic camp. While men were traditionally the political and war leaders, women were the centers of authority in the home and led some of the most critical religious practices. In the Niitsitapi worldview, women were seen as possessing an innate reproductive power that made them men's greatest support and greatest weapon. This is most evident in the Sundance, where the holy woman, medicine woman, is the most important functionary. Without a woman of high virtue to take the vow and lead the rites, the highest Blackfoot ceremony could not be performed. The fluidity of gender roles in traditional Niitsitapi society is best exemplified by the biography of Pitamaka, originally named Brown Weasel Woman. Born into the Piakani tribe in the 19th century, she showed little interest in domestic tasks, preferring to hunt and play with her brothers. Her father, a respected warrior, taught her the skills of combat and riding. Her success led the head chief, Lone Walker, to bestow upon her the name Running Eagle, a moniker previously reserved for male warriors. She eventually rose to the rank of war chief, leading her people in numerous victories until she was killed in battle, against the Flathead tribe in 1878. Her story remains a cornerstone of Niitsitapi identity, illustrating the traditional belief that individuals had the freedom to choose their own life trajectory based on their skills and spiritual guidance. Niitsitapi's spiritual life was anchored by medicine bundles, collections of sacred items such as animal remains, seeds, and pipes that symbolize a spiritual journey or a gift from the supernatural world. These bundles were treated with extreme reverence. They were never allowed to touch the ground and were only opened on special occasions with complex rituals involving smoking, singing in groups of 7, and prayers to the sun. Membership in sacred societies provided a framework for social and spiritual growth. For men, these were all-comrade societies that progressed by age. Women also had their own exclusive organizations, most notably the Matoki Society. The Horn Society, however, stood apart as a highly secretive and powerful organization responsible for maintaining order and traditional protocols within the tribe. The Sun Dance, Okan, served as a tribal festival where all these rituals converged. It was initiated by a woman's vow, and its success depended on the holy woman and her husband purchasing the Natoas bundle. The ceremony involved the construction of a 100-willow sweat lodge for purification and the erection of the Sun Lodge with its sacred center pole. Warriors would count ku on the pole, and weather dancers, sun priests, would pray for the health of the people. This event was the primary mechanism for reinforcing national unity and collective identity among the 4 tribes. The late 18th and 19th centuries were marked by the increasing presence of European traders and settlers, who brought both valuable trade goods and catastrophic diseases. Smallpox epidemics in 1780 and 1837 devastated the Niitsitapi population, with the first outbreak killing approximately 1/3 of the people after a raiding party unknowingly entered a Shoshone camp infected with the virus. Despite these losses, the Niitsitapi remained a formidable power, resisting white encroachment on their territory for decades. However, the U.S. government sought to pacify the region to allow for ranching and railroad expansion. This tension culminated in the Bear River Massacre, also known as the Baker or Marias Massacre, on January 23, 1870. In a case of mistaken identity, Major Eugene Baker led a column of cavalry to attack the peaceful camp of Chief Heavy Runner, mistakenly believing they were the hostile band of Mountain Chief. Despite Heavy Runner waving his papers of peace, the soldiers murdered 217 people, mostly women and children. This event, one of the deadliest in U.S. history, marked the end of organized Niitsitapi military resistance in Montana. The ultimate collapse of the Niitsitapi way of life was precipitated by the near extinction of the bison. By 1881, non-native hunters and government policies had effectively eradicated the herds that were the foundation of the Blackfoot economy and diet. Forced onto reservations and reserves, the people became entirely dependent on government rations, which were often withheld as a policy of submission. The winter of 1883 to 1884 is remembered as the Starvation Winter, a period of profound tragedy where over 600 Piegans, roughly a quarter of the tribe in Montana, perished from hunger. Bureaucratic failures at the Indian Bureau, which had falsely reported the Blackfeet as self-supporting, led to a drastic reduction in food supplies just as the last game animals were hunted out. Harrowing primary accounts describe mothers holding up shrunken infants to agency windows in a desperate plea for food. Major Allen's investigation of 23 lodges found food in only 2, a single rabbit being boiled for a child and a steer's hoof being cooked for soup. Some families survived only because members traveled far off the reservation to hunt, defying army escorts that sought to keep them confined. This period of forced starvation had enduring consequences, fundamentally altering the Niitsitapi's pattern of life and forcing a transition to ranching and farming under the duress of survival. The Niitsitapi language, Siksikai Pawasan, is a vital repository of cultural knowledge, yet it is currently classified as definitely endangered by UNESCO, with fewer than 5,000 native speakers in 2021. The decline is attributed to the long-term impacts of residential schools and the 60s scoop, where children were systematically denied their linguistic heritage. Language revitalization efforts are now central to Niitsitapi sovereignty. Programs such as the Piakani Traditional Knowledge Services focus on documenting Old Blackfoot and teaching it to younger generations. These efforts recognize that the language is not just a means of communication, but a specific way of perceiving the universe, one where real people are equal partners with all other beings.